My daughter died 7 years ago or so, I believed. Every January, I sent her husband $40,000 money I earned, running a small grocery store with aching hands and sleepless nights. I did it for my granddaughter, for my wife who died of grief believing our daughter was gone, and for the daughter I thought I had already buried. Then one quiet afternoon at the park, my 7-year-old granddaughter grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Grandpa, please stop sending him money. Grandpa, come to the house and see." I did exactly what she said, and what I saw there nearly stopped my heart. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If this story already caught your attention, take a second to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps this channel grow. Also, a gentle reminder, some elements have been altered for narrative and educational purposes. Any similarities are coincidental, but the truth behind the message is meant to help. I'm Stephen Harper, 68 years old, and for the past 7 years, I've been doing my best to hold what's left of my family together. That means every other Saturday I take my granddaughter Ivy, she's 7, to Riverside Park for ice cream. Chocolate chip for me, strawberry swirl for her. It's our routine, has been since her mother died. Willa was my daughter, my only child. 7 years ago, she died in a car accident on Route 9. Vehicle went off the road, caught fire. They said the body was too badly burned for an open casket. We cremated what was left. 6 months later, my wife Gloria died too. The doctors called it a heart attack, but I knew the truth. She died of a broken heart. Losing Willa killed her just as surely as that accident killed our daughter. So now it's just me, Ivy, and her father, Brad, my son-in-law. Brad's raising Ivy alone and I help out. $40,000 a year every January for the past 7 years. It's what Willa would have wanted. It's what family does. That September afternoon at the park seemed normal enough. Ivy sat beside me on our usual bench near the old oak tree, kicking her light-up sneakers and telling me about her spelling test. She'd gotten an A. I told her I was proud. She smiled that same smile Willa used to have, and for a moment everything felt okay. Then she stopped smiling. Grandpa. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She glanced over her shoulder toward the playground, then leaned in close. Please stop sending money. I blinked. What? The money. To Daddy. Her little hand gripped my sleeve and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before: fear. Please stop. There's something you need to see. My chest tightened. Ivy, what are you talking about? Just watch him, Grandpa. Watch Daddy. You'll see. She pulled away suddenly, hopping off the bench. I have to go. He'll be mad if we're late. Wait, Ivy, if something's wrong. Please, Grandpa, just watch him. She wouldn't say another word. The drive to Brad's house was silent. Ivy stared out the window, clutching her backpack, like it was a life preserver. I wanted to ask more questions, but the look on her face told me not to push. Not yet. Brad's house is a modest 2-story on Maple Street. White siding, black shutters, a lawn that's always a week past, needing a mow. I'd helped him with the down payment 4 years ago, another check I'd written without thinking twice. He was waiting on the front steps when we pulled up. You're late, he said flatly. Traffic, I lied. Ivy was already out of the car, head down, hurrying toward the door. Brad barely looked at her. Go inside and start your homework. She didn't say goodbye to me, just disappeared into the house. I stood there on the sidewalk watching through the window as Ivy sat down at the dining room table. Brad walked right past her, phone pressed to his ear, not even glancing her way. Something twisted in my gut. Patskati. I called out before he could close the door. Is everything okay with Ivy? He shrugged. She's fine. Why wouldn't she be? She just seemed quiet. She's 7. Kids get moody. He paused, then added, Hey, any chance you could send next year's payment early? Got some expenses coming up. Next year's payment. It was September. I wouldn't normally send the money until January. What kind of expenses? House stuff. You know how it is. He wasn't looking at me. Forget it. January's fine. The door closed. I got back in my car and sat there, engine-running hands gripping the steering wheel. My mind was racing. Watch him, Ivy had said. There's something you need to see. $40,000 a year. $280,000 over 7 years. That was a lot of money for a man who barely said thank you, a man who couldn't even look his own daughter in the eye. I drove home as the sun set, painting the Pennsylvania sky orange and purple. The house was quiet when I got there. It's been quiet since Gloria died. Some nights I still reach for her in my sleep, forgetting for half a second that she's gone. Tonight I couldn't even think about sleep. I kept replaying every interaction I'd had with Brad over the past 7 years. The way he'd asked for money, but never sent updates about Ivy. Never invited me to dinner. Never called just to talk. He'd moved on fast after Willa died, started dating someone new within a year. I'd told myself everyone grieved differently, but what if I'd been wrong? What if there was something I'd missed? Willa's urn was sitting on my mantel downstairs. I'd kept it there for 7 years because I couldn't let go. Couldn't scatter her ashes like Gloria had wanted. It was all I had left of my daughter, or so I thought. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling. What did Ivy mean? What was I supposed to see? The night they told me Willa was dead, I didn't believe them. It was March 15th, 2017. 2 officers stood on my front porch at 3 in the morning, their faces carefully neutral in that way cops learn to do when they're about to destroy your world. Behind them, the street was empty and cold. I remember thinking it was too quiet for news like that. There's been an accident on Route 9, the older one said. Your daughter's vehicle went off the road. Vehicle, not car, not Willa's Honda. Vehicle. Like using a distant word could soften what came next. She's at the hospital. I asked, already reaching for my coat. Gloria was behind me, gripping my arm. The officer shook his head. Sir, I'm sorry. There was a fire. Your son-in-law identified her from dental records. That's when Gloria's knees buckled. The details came in pieces over the following days. Willa had been driving home late from a friend's house, Natalie Hughes, her best friend since college. The car had veered off Route 9 near mile marker 47, hit a tree, and caught fire. By the time emergency crews arrived, the vehicle was fully engulfed. They said she died on impact. They said she didn't suffer. I've never been sure if that was true or just something they tell families. The funeral was closed casket. Had to be. Brad stood beside me at the service, Ivy on his hip. She was barely 6 months old then. And I remember thinking how wrong it was that my daughter's baby would never remember her mother's face, never hear her laugh, never know how Willa used to sing off-key in the shower or how she cried during sappy commercials. They gave us an urn, simple brass about the size of a shoebox. It sat on our mantel for a week before Gloria could even look at it. We should scatter her ashes at the lake, she said one morning, voice hollow. Remember how much she loved it there. We'd spent every summer at Lake Rayburn when Willa was growing up. She'd learned to swim there, caught her first fish, kissed her first boyfriend under the dock. Gloria was right, it was the perfect place. But then Gloria died. 6 months after we buried our daughter, my wife's heart gave out. Just stopped. The doctors called it cardiac arrest, but I knew better. You can die of a broken heart. I watched it happen. She got thinner, quieter, more distant every day, until one morning I woke up and she was gone. Found her in the kitchen, collapsed by the coffee maker, the same one Willa had bought us for Christmas 3 years earlier. After that, I couldn't bring myself to scatter the ashes. Couldn't let go of that urn. It felt like letting go of Willa all over again, and I'd already lost too much. So it stayed on the mantel. Still does. 7 years now. Harper Family Market kept me going. The store's been in my family for 35 years. My father started it back in 1989, and I took over when he retired. It's nothing fancy. Just a neighborhood grocery on the corner of 5th and Chestnut. The kind of place where people know your name and pay with crumpled bills from their jacket pockets. Mrs. Patterson buys her tea there every Tuesday. Old Joe Fletcher gets his lottery tickets every Friday. They all knew Willa. They all came to the funeral. After Gloria died, the store became my anchor. I'd open at 6 every morning, stock shelves ring up customers close at 8. The routine kept me sane, kept me from thinking too much about the empty house waiting for me at the end of each day, and I kept my promise to Willa. Before she died, she'd made me swear that if anything ever happened to her, I'd take care of Ivy. Make sure she had everything she needed. So I did. $40,000 a year sent to Brad every January like clockwork. It wasn't about the money. It was about keeping my daughter's memory alive, about making sure Ivy had opportunities, stability, a future. Brad never said much about it. A quick thanks in a text message, maybe. No updates on how the money was being used. No invitations to see Ivy more than our every other Saturday ice cream trips. I told myself he was just private, that grief made people withdraw. But Ivy's words at the park kept circling back. Please stop sending money. There's something you need to see. I stood in front of Willa's urn that night after driving home from Brad's house. Just stood there in my living room, staring at it in the dim light from the street lamp outside. 7 years I'd kept this thing. 7 years I'd honored it like it was sacred. What if something was wrong? What if Ivy knew something I didn't? I thought about the accident again. The details that never quite added up. How Willa had been driving on Route 9, a road she knew by heart, and somehow lost control on a clear night. How the fire had been so intense there was nothing left to identify. How Brad had been the one to confirm it was her. I'd never questioned it. Why would I? Brad was her husband. He loved her. And I was drowning in my own grief, trying to keep Gloria alive, trying to keep myself from falling apart. But now standing there in the quiet house with Ivy's frightened voice echoing in my head, I started to wonder, what had I missed? What was I still missing? For 7 years, I'd kept my promise. I'd sent the money. I'd trusted Brad. I'd believed the story they told me about the accident and the fire and the urn full of ashes. But now Ivy's words made me wonder, what was I really paying for? I saw the woman who would change everything on a Tuesday morning. The days after Ivy's warning at the park had been restless. I went through the motions, opening the store at 6 stocking shelves, helping customers, but my thoughts kept circling back to her words. Watch him. There's something you need to see. I tried. I drove past Brad's house twice, parked down the street like a nervous fool, and watched. Nothing seemed out of place. Just a man leaving for work, coming home, living his life. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe Ivy had been confused the way children sometimes are. That's what I told myself anyway. Tuesday mornings at Harper Family Market are predictable. Mrs. Patterson comes in around 7 for her tea. Old Joe Fletcher arrives at 8 for lottery tickets and gum. By 9, there's a brief rush of people grabbing coffee before work. I know their routines. They know mine. It's comfortable. The woman walked in at 9:15. I noticed her immediately because she wasn't a regular. Strangers happen, but something about her made me look twice. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, jeans, and an expensive-looking leather jacket. She moved with confidence, like she knew exactly where she was going. She went straight to the coffee aisle. I stood behind the register, sorting receipts, my hands stiff with arthritis. My knuckles ached, and I'd already dropped a roll of quarters that morning. Age had a way of slowing everything down. The woman placed a bag of ground coffee and a small jar of cinnamon on the counter. That all for you? I asked. Yes. Her voice was clipped. Not rude, just distant. She handed me a 20 without looking up. 8.47's your change. She took it and turned to leave. That should have been the end of it. But as she passed me, something tugged at my memory. The way she moved. The shape of her face. Something familiar I couldn't place. Ma'am, I called. She stopped and glanced back. Yes. Have we met before? Her expression didn't change. I don't think so. You just remind me of someone. I hear that a lot. She pushed through the door and left. I stood there staring after her, trying to remember who she reminded me of. The harder I tried, the further it slipped away. 20 minutes later, I stepped outside to bring in the sandwich board sign. That's when I saw her again. She stood across the street beside a silver sedan. And she wasn't alone. Brad was with her. They were talking. Brad leaned against the car, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. She said something, and he laughed. Then she touched his arm briefly and got into the driver's seat. Brad walked around and climbed into the passenger side. I stood frozen sandwich board forgotten in my hands, watching the car pull away down 5th Street. Questions raced through my mind. Who was she? Why was Brad meeting her here? Why hadn't he mentioned her? I thought about how she avoided my eyes, how quickly she left. Coffee and cinnamon? Just those 2 items. Nothing else. Coffee and cinnamon. The combination unsettled me, though I couldn't explain why. I brought the sign inside, locked the door, and stood alone in the quiet store. The lights hummed. Cars passed outside. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt right. Ivy's voice echoed again. Watch him. I had watched, and now I had seen something. But I didn't understand it yet. Brad had never mentioned a woman. After Willa died, he'd said he dated a little nothing serious. He never introduced anyone to Ivy or me. So who was this woman? And why now? I pulled out my phone and stared at it. Roger Stevens had been my friend for 40 years. We met when his kids went to school with Willa. He'd been a detective for 30 years before retiring. He knew how to read situations, how to find answers when things didn't add up. I hadn't wanted to bother him. Hadn't wanted to admit I might be chasing shadows because of something a child said. But now there was a woman. A woman I couldn't place. A woman meeting Brad outside my store. A woman who bought coffee and cinnamon and left like she didn't want to be remembered. I opened Roger's contact and typed a message. Need to talk. Can you come by the store? His reply came quickly. Be there in 20. I set the phone down and looked around the store. The shelves I'd stocked for decades. The register that had served generations. The coffee aisle where the woman had stood minutes earlier. Everything looked the same. But deep in my gut, where instinct lives, I knew something was very wrong. Who was she? And why was she with Brad? When you need to find the truth, you call someone who knows how to look for lies. Roger Stevens had been my friend for 40 years, and in that time I'd learned that he had a particular way of listening. Not the polite nodding most people do while waiting for their turn to talk, but real listening, the kind where he'd tilt his head slightly, eyes focused, picking apart every word like he was solving a puzzle. He walked into Harper Family Market 23 minutes after I'd sent the text. Gray hair, cut military short jeans, and a flannel shirt, reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. 67 years old, and still moved like a man who'd spent 3 decades chasing criminals through back alleys. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Thanks, Roger. He glanced around the empty store. You closed. Should've flipped the sign. Figured we needed privacy. So it must be serious. He pulled up a stool behind the counter and settled in. What's going on? I didn't know where to start, so I started with Ivy. Told him about the ice cream at the park. The whisper, the fear in her eyes when she'd said, watch him. Roger didn't interrupt, just pulled a small notebook from his pocket. He always carried one even in retirement, and jotted down notes. Then I told him about this morning. The woman with the dark hair and leather jacket. Coffee and cinnamon. The way she'd avoided my eyes. How I'd seen her 20 minutes later getting into a car with Brad. You get a plate number? Roger asked. No, I was too surprised. Description of the vehicle. Silver sedan, maybe a Honda or Toyota. I wasn't paying attention to the car. He made another note. What about the woman, height, weight, distinguishing features? I thought back, trying to remember details. 5'6", maybe 5'7". Thin, dark hair in a ponytail. Mid-30s. Expensive-looking leather jacket, brown with zippers. You said she reminded you of someone. Yeah, but I can't place it. Just a feeling. Roger tapped his pen against the notebook. And Brad's never mentioned a woman. Never. But you've been giving him $40,000 a year for 7 years. For Ivy, I said quickly. The money's for Ivy. Right. Roger's tone was neutral, but I knew what he was thinking. Stephen, when's the last time Brad gave you an update on how that money's being used? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. Not a real answer anyway. Brad had never sent receipts, never explained expenses, just accepted the check every January with a quick thanks and moved on. He's raising a daughter alone. I said, defensive now. I'm sure it's going to good use. I'm sure. Roger set his pen down and looked at me. But Ivy told you to stop sending money and to watch Brad. That's not normal, Stephen. 7-year-olds don't say things like that unless something's wrong. I know. So what do you want me to do? That was the question, wasn't it? I'd called Roger because some part of me knew I needed help. But saying it out loud felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I need to know what's going on, I said finally. I need to know if Ivy's safe. If Brad's, I don't know, doing something he shouldn't be. Roger leaned back on the stool, arms crossed. You want surveillance? Is that legal? On a public street, watching someone's comings and goings from outside their property. He shrugged. Not illegal. Not particularly ethical if you're doing it to a family member, but not illegal. The word family hit harder than it should have. Brad wasn't blood, but he was Willa's husband, Ivy's father. For 7 years, I'd sent him money because that's what family did. Now I was talking about spying on him like he was a suspect. I don't want to betray his trust. I said quietly. Then don't. Roger's voice was firm. Go home. Forget about the woman. Forget about Ivy's warning. Tell yourself everything's fine and keep writing those checks. I looked up sharply. You think I should ignore this? No. He met my eyes. I think you need to decide what matters more, Brad's trust or Ivy's safety. The words hung in the air between us. She's 7 years old. Roger continued. She came to you scared enough to whisper a warning in a park. She told you to stop sending money and to watch her father. Kids that age don't make things up, Stephen. They don't have the imagination for it. If Ivy's worried, there's a reason. I thought about Ivy's face at the park. The way she'd gripped my sleeve. The fear in her eyes. What do we do? I asked. Roger picked up his pen again. We start simple. I've still got some equipment from my detective days, cameras, recording devices, all legal for private investigation purposes. We set up outside Brad's house. Watch who comes and goes. See if the mystery woman shows up again. Track his routine. Look for patterns. For how long? As long as it takes. He flipped to a fresh page in his notebook. Could be a few days. Could be a couple weeks. Depends on what we find. And if we find nothing, then you'll know Ivy was confused, and you can sleep better at night. Roger looked at me over his reading glasses. But I've been doing this a long time, Stephen. And my gut says we're going to find something. Mine did too. That was the problem. When do we start? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I'll bring the equipment. We'll park down the street from Brad's place, see what happens. He stood tucking the notebook back into his pocket. Get some rest tonight. Once we start this, you need to be ready for whatever we find. I nodded, but I knew I wouldn't rest. Hadn't really rested since Ivy's whisper at the park. Roger headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Stephen, you're doing the right thing. Protecting a kid always is. Even if it means going behind Brad's back, especially then. He pushed the door open and the little bell above it chimed. See you tomorrow, 6 a.m. The door closed behind him, and I was alone in the store again. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the coffee aisle where the woman had stood that morning, at the register where she'd paid in cash, at the front window where I'd watched her drive away with Brad. Tomorrow we'd start watching, start looking for answers, and I'd cross a line I'd never imagined crossing. As I drove home, I felt like I was crossing a line, but I had to know. For Ivy, money tells a story. I just had to read it. Before we started watching Brad, I needed to look at my own records. That evening, I spread 7 years of bank statements across my kitchen table. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I'd made coffee strong black, the way Gloria used to make it when we'd sit up late doing taxes or planning Willa's college fund. The mug sat untouched beside me as I worked, steam rising into the dim light above the table. January 2018. $40,000 wired to Bradley Wallace. The memo line read, "Family support." January 2019. Same amount. Same memo. I went through every year. 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. $40,000 every single time like clockwork. $280,000 total. I'd known the amount, obviously. I wrote the checks, authorized the transfers, but seeing it laid out like this 7 years in a row, 7 identical transactions, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. That was a fortune. A small fortune maybe, but more money than most people saw in a lifetime. And what did I have to show for it? I pulled out a shoebox I kept in the hall closet. The one with receipts and correspondence, anything related to Brad and Ivy. I sorted through 7 years of paperwork, looking for proof that the money had been used properly, proof that Brad was grateful, proof of anything, really. What I found was nothing. No thank you notes. No updates on Ivy's education or activities. No pictures of school events or birthday parties. Not a single piece of paper showing how the money had been spent or why it was needed. The only communications I had were text messages, and they were brief. Almost cold. In January 2019, he'd written, "Got the transfer, thanks." The next year, just received, appreciate it. By 2021, it was down to transfer came through. Not even a full sentence most years, just acknowledgement that he'd taken the money and moved on. I pulled up my phone and scrolled back through our text history, hundreds of messages over 7 years, and almost all of them were initiated by me. I'd ask how Ivy was doing in school. Could I take her to the park this weekend? Did she need winter clothes? I could pick some up. Brad's responses were always short. "She's fine." "Sure." "We're good." Never details. Never stories about what Ivy was learning or who her friends were. Never invitations to come over for dinner or join them for anything. Just the bare minimum required to keep me from asking more questions. And then there were the early requests. I flipped through my calendar checking dates. Every year, like clockwork, Brad would text me in November or December asking if I could send the payment early. In November 2019, he'd written about expenses coming up before Christmas. December 2020, house repairs. November 2021, Ivy's school stuff. I'd always said yes, always sent it early, because family helped family, and I'd promised Willa I'd take care of her daughter. But now looking at the pattern, something felt wrong. What kind of expenses came up every single year at the exact same time? And why did a man receiving $40,000 annually need it early? What was he spending it on that couldn't wait a few weeks? I opened my laptop and pulled up Brad's social media, something I rarely did. His Facebook was sparse. A few photos of Ivy from years ago, some posts about sports teams, nothing personal. His privacy settings were tight, so I could barely see anything. But one thing I could see was that his relationship status had changed 2 years ago from widowed to in a relationship. Then 6 months later, it went back to blank. He'd never mentioned dating anyone. Never introduced anyone to Ivy or me. Who had it been? And what happened? I thought about the woman from this morning. The coffee and cinnamon. The way she'd touched Brad's arm before getting in the car. Was she the one? Or someone new? I pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. Not because I knew what I was looking for, but because Roger had taught me once that patterns emerged when you wrote things down. I wrote down everything I could think of. Brad asking for money early every November or December. Never providing updates or receipts. Minimal communication. No family involvement. The relationship status changed from 2 years ago. The mystery woman today. Then I wrote down my questions. Where was the $280,000 going? Who was the woman? Why did Ivy want me to stop sending money? What was Ivy afraid of? I set the pen down and looked at the pile of bank statements. 7 years of faith. 7 years of trust. 7 years of believing Brad was doing right by my granddaughter, because I couldn't imagine a father doing anything else. But what if I'd been wrong? I got up and walked to the living room, where Willa's urn still sat on the mantel. Beside it was a framed photo of Willa, Gloria, and me at Lake Rayburn the summer before the accident. Willa was laughing, head thrown back, Gloria's arm around her shoulders. Both of them looked so alive. "I'm trying, Willa," I said to the photo. "I'm trying to do right by Ivy. I just don't know if I've been doing it the right way." The house was silent. I picked up another photo from the bookshelf, this one of Ivy from last year. She was sitting on the front steps of Brad's house, arms wrapped around her knees, not quite smiling. I'd taken it during one of my visits. At the time, I'd thought she looked thoughtful. Now I wondered if she'd looked sad. How long had she been trying to tell me something was wrong? I gathered all the bank statements and organized them by year. Added the screenshots of our text messages, the information about his social media, the notes I'd just written. Everything Roger might need to understand what we were dealing with. I put it all in a folder and set it by the front door so I wouldn't forget it in the morning. $280,000. That number kept echoing in my head. Not because it was money I couldn't afford to give. The store did well enough, and Gloria and I had been careful savers. But because it represented 7 years of promises. 7 years of trying to honor Willa's memory by taking care of her family. What if her family didn't need taking care of? What if they'd been taking advantage? I poured the cold coffee down the sink, rinsed the mug, and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the dark street. Tomorrow at 6 in the morning, Roger and I would park outside Brad's house and start watching. Start looking for answers to questions I should have asked years ago. I should have felt guilty. Should have felt like I was betraying Brad's trust by spying on him. But all I felt was determined. Ivy had asked me to watch, had trusted me enough to whisper a warning, and I'd failed her for 7 years by not asking the hard questions, by accepting Brad's silence as normal. I wouldn't fail her anymore. Tomorrow, Roger and I would start watching. Whatever we found, I was ready. Some truths are buried in plain sight. The urn sat on my mantel for 7 years. I never opened it. After organizing all the bank statements and preparing the folder for Roger, I should have gone to bed. It was past 11, and we were meeting at 6 in the morning. But I stood in the living room, staring at that brass urn the way I'd stared at it 1,000 times before, and something felt different. The woman at the store had bought coffee and cinnamon. 2 items, nothing else. I'd been trying all evening to figure out why that bothered me, and now standing here in the dim light with nothing but silence and the weight of 7 years pressing down, I finally understood. Coffee and cinnamon. My eyes moved from the urn to the framed photo beside it. Willa, Gloria, and me at Lake Rayburn, all of us smiling, all of us believing we had more time. I'm sorry, I whispered to Gloria's image. I should have looked sooner. I'd avoided the urn for 7 years. Told myself it was because I couldn't let go, because opening it meant accepting that Willa was really gone. But maybe the truth was simpler. Maybe some part of me had known even then that something was wrong. I lifted the urn from the mantel. It was heavier than I remembered, about the size of a shoebox, cold brass against my palms. The lid was sealed with a simple threaded cap, the kind you could unscrew with your hands. For a long moment, I just held it. Thought about Gloria standing in this exact spot 7 years ago, crying so hard she couldn't breathe. Thought about the funeral. The closed casket, Brad's face carefully neutral as he accepted condolences. Thought about Ivy, 6 months old and oblivious, sleeping through her mother's memorial service. I carried the urn to the kitchen table and set it down under the overhead light. My hands shook as I gripped the lid. "Forgive me, Willa," I said and twisted. The lid came off easily. Too easily. Like it had been opened before. Inside was a clear plastic bag tied at the top with a twist tie. Through the plastic, I could see dark powder, almost black in the harsh kitchen light. It looked like ash. Looked exactly like what you'd expect cremated remains to look like. I untied the bag and peered inside. The powder was coarse, not fine. Grainy. I reached in and let some run through my fingers. It felt wrong. Too rough. Too textured. Then I smelled it. Coffee. Not the faint burnt smell of cremated remains. Not the sterile nothing of ash. But coffee. Rich, dark, unmistakable. My stomach turned. I brought the bag closer, inhaling deeper. Yes. Definitely coffee. And something else underneath it. Something sweet and spicy. Cinnamon. The kitchen tilted. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. No. No, this couldn't be right. This was Willa. This was my daughter. They'd told me it was her. Brad had identified her. The funeral home had handled everything. I dumped the contents of the bag onto the table. Brown powder spilled out in a heap. Coffee grounds, darker in some spots, lighter in others. I sifted through it with my fingers, searching for something, anything that looked like bone. Like the fragments they tell you remain after cremation. Nothing, just coffee. And mixed throughout flecks of reddish brown that I recognized immediately from 35 years of running a grocery store. Cinnamon, ground cinnamon. I touched one of the flecks to my tongue. Sweet. Spicy. Definitely cinnamon. The powder wasn't ash. It was coffee grounds and baking spices, the kind you'd buy at any store. The kind a woman with dark hair and a leather jacket had bought from my store just this morning. For 7 years I'd kept this urn on my mantel. For 7 years I'd treated it like it was sacred. Gloria had stood here crying, had kissed the cold brass and whispered goodbye to our daughter. She'd died 6 months later with a broken heart, believing Willa's remains were resting above our fireplace. And it was coffee, kitchen scraps, a joke. The rage hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. I swept my arm across the table, sending the urn clattering to the floor. It rang like a bell as it bounced, hollow and mocking. "Damn you!" I shouted at no one. At Brad. At whoever had done this. "Damn you!" I braced my hands on the table, shoulders heaving, staring down at the pile of coffee and cinnamon scattered across the wood. 7 years. 7 years of grief. 7 years of Gloria destroying herself with sorrow. 7 years of me honoring an empty promise, paying money to a man who'd helped fake my daughter's death. Because that's what this was. Had to be. If the urn was fake, then the funeral was fake. If the funeral was fake, then maybe the body was fake. And if the body was fake, my phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to pick it up. I pulled up Roger's contact and called. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. "Stephen, it's almost midnight." "The urn!" My voice came out hoarse, shaking. "Roger, the urn is fake." Silence on the other end. Then more alert. "What do you mean, fake?" I opened it. "It's not Willa, it's coffee. Coffee and cinnamon. Just like the woman at the store bought this morning." I heard rustling like he was sitting up. "You're sure?" "I'm looking at it right now. Spread all over my kitchen table." I laughed, but it came out broken. My wife died thinking our daughter's ashes were on the mantel. and it was coffee the whole time. "Stephen." Roger's voice was calm, steady, the detective voice. "Listen to me. Don't touch anything else. Don't clean it up. I'm coming over right now. They lied to us." The words felt thick in my throat. The funeral, the body. Brad identified someone who wasn't Willa. They burned someone else and gave us kitchen scraps in a brass box. "I'm 10 minutes away. Stay there. Don't call Brad. Don't call anyone. I'm coming." The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by coffee grounds and cinnamon, staring at the overturned urn on the floor. The house was silent, except for my ragged breathing. 7 years ago, they'd told me my daughter was dead. They'd shown me a closed casket. They'd handed me this urn and told me it contained her remains. And I'd believed them. Gloria had believed them. We'd mourned. We'd broken. We'd died a little bit ourselves. And it was all a lie. I looked at the scattered coffee grounds, at the cinnamon mixed throughout, at the empty brass urn lying on its side. My daughter's urn was a lie. What else had they lied about? Surveillance is mostly waiting, but when something happens, everything changes. Roger brought the cameras the next morning. He'd stayed until nearly 1 a.m., the night before, documenting the coffee grounds and cinnamon from the urn, photographing everything, and scribbling notes into his small notebook. Before leaving, he told me to get some sleep and that we'd start surveillance at dawn. I tried. I lay awake thinking about brass urns, kitchen scraps, and 7 years of trust that might have been misplaced. When Roger knocked at 5:30, I was already dressed. "You look terrible," he said, hauling 2 black duffel bags inside. "Didn't sleep? Figured." He set the bags on my kitchen table and unzipped one. Inside were cameras, lenses, recorders, and equipment I didn't recognize. "We'll park down the street from Brad's house. Public road. Legal surveillance. 2 old guys sitting in a car. What are we watching for? Patterns. Who comes and goes? When Brad leaves. When he gets home. And whether your mystery woman shows up again." He lifted a camera with a long lens, and maybe we learn where $280,000 went. We drove to Brad's neighborhood in Roger's gray sedan, a car so ordinary it blended into any street. He parked 3 houses down, far enough not to draw attention, close enough to see the driveway and front door clearly. Then we waited. Brad left at 7:45. He backed out, turned toward the main road, and disappeared. Roger wrote the time down. "Usual schedule?" Roger asked. "It used to be. Construction management, I think." "I haven't asked in years." Roger nodded but said nothing. We stayed until noon, then rotated. Roger went home. I stayed watching the house, glancing at Ivy's upstairs window, hoping she was all right. Nothing happened that afternoon. Brad came home at 6, went inside, and didn't come back out. A normal evening. The second day followed the same rhythm. Brad left at 7:45, came home at 6. Roger and I took shifts documenting everything. Then late afternoon on day 2, the woman arrived, the same silver sedan from the store. She pulled into Brad's driveway at 2:30, walked to the front door and unlocked it. "She has a key," I said, calling Roger. He arrived 20 minutes later with the telephoto lens. We watched as Brad and the woman sat on the couch. We couldn't hear them, but we could see her lean close, see Brad laugh, see her touch his arm with easy familiarity. They looked comfortable, familiar. "Who is she?" I asked. "When did Brad last mention dating?" Roger snapped photos. "He hasn't, not once." She stayed 2 hours. When she left, Brad walked her to her car. They stood in the driveway talking. Her hand rested on his chest. His hand settled at her waist. Then she drove off. Roger wrote down her license plate. The third day she came back. Same time, same routine. Stayed an hour. Left. That weekend when I took Ivy for ice cream, Brad didn't mention her. Didn't mention dating. Acted like nothing had changed, but something had. By day 4, we knew Brad's routine. Up at 7. Gone by 7:45. Home by 6. The woman visited every other afternoon. Then, on the fourth morning, everything shifted. Brad left at 10 a.m. That's new, I said. Roger started the engine. Let's see where he goes. We followed him, keeping distance. Past Harper Family Market, past familiar streets, into the industrial district on the east side of town. Warehouses, loading docks, semi-trucks. Brad turned onto East Industrial Avenue and pulled into a worn parking lot. A large brick warehouse, building 447, narrow windows, few cars. He parked near a side entrance and went inside. Roger stopped across the street behind a delivery truck. What is this place? I asked. Roger searched on his phone. Warehouse, owned by a holding company. Used for storage or light manufacturing. Why would Brad be here? That's what we need to learn. We waited. 45 minutes passed before Brad came out, got in his car, and drove away. We stayed. What do you think he's doing in there? I asked. Roger tapped his notebook. Could be storage. A side operation. Meetings. With her, maybe. He wrote down the address. We come back. Watch this place like his house. I stared at the building. Tall, sealed windows. Quiet. Empty looking. But Brad had just spent 45 minutes inside. There's something in there, I said. Roger nodded. Yeah. And we're going to find out what it is. I spent the entire night pacing through my house, unable to sleep. Unable to think about anything except the voice we'd heard inside the warehouse. The crying, the pleading, the words that replayed over and over in my head like a broken record. I've been here for 7 years. When Roger knocked on my door at 7 that morning, I had already been awake for hours. You look worse than yesterday, he said, as he carried his laptop bag inside. Didn't sleep. Figured. He placed the laptop on my kitchen table and opened it. Stephen, I need you to sit down for this. What is it? Just sit, please. I sat. Roger pulled up a video file. Remember when I told you I still have contacts on the force? One of them accessed security footage around the warehouse. All public cameras. Traffic monitoring. Completely legal. And this. He pressed play. The footage was black and white and grainy, the kind used on nightly news broadcasts. A wide shot of East Industrial Avenue appeared, the timestamp showing early afternoon 3 days earlier. Cars passed. A delivery truck. Nothing unusual. Then a woman entered the frame from the left, walking along the sidewalk. That's the warehouse, Roger said, pointing to a building in the background. That's the side entrance Brad uses. The woman walked closer to the camera. Her face was partially turned away, but as she moved, the angle shifted. Roger paused the video. Look at her face, Stephen. I leaned closer. The image wasn't sharp, but it didn't need to be. Dark hair pulled back. Thin frame. Something familiar in her posture and the way her head tilted slightly as she walked. My heart stopped. No, I whispered. Look closer. Roger zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the shape remained. The nose. The cheekbones. That subtle tilt of the head I had seen thousands of times when she was a teenager, when she was in college, when she stood beside me on her wedding day. That's not possible, I said, though. My voice was shaking. Roger opened another window. I ran the image through facial recognition software. Compared it to Willa's driver's license photo from 7 years ago. 2 images appeared side by side. On the left, Willa's license photo from 2017. Younger, smiling. On the right, a still frame from the warehouse footage. Older, no smile. Darker hair, but the same face. 97% match, Roger said softly. Stephen, that's Willa. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. No, she's dead. We buried her. We had a funeral. You had a closed casket funeral, Roger said gently. You cremated someone. But you never saw a body. And the urn was filled with coffee grounds. I stared at the screen, at my daughter's face, changed older but unmistakably alive. She's alive, I whispered. Yes. Willa's alive. Yes. The words didn't make sense. For 7 years, I had mourned her. I had stood at her grave, at that empty grave with its false headstone, and talked to her like she could hear me. For 7 years her urn sat on my mantel, and I believed it held her ashes, and she was alive. The grief came first. Not relief, not joy. Grief, crushing and suffocating. Grief for 7 years stolen from us. 7 years Gloria and I could have spent with our daughter. 7 years Ivy could have known her mother. Then the rage followed. Gloria died believing Willa was dead, I said, my voice breaking. She died of a broken heart. And our daughter was alive the entire time. Roger stayed silent. I paid Brad $280,000, I continued. $280,000 to care for Ivy because her mother was supposedly dead. I know. Ivy thinks she's an orphan, I said, standing abruptly. She doesn't even know her own mother is alive. How could Willa let us believe this? How could she let Gloria die thinking? Stephen, Roger said firmly. We don't know the full story. What story could possibly justify this? I don't know, he said. But think about what we heard yesterday. That voice in the warehouse. She was crying, begging. She said she'd been there for 7 years. Does that sound like someone who chose to disappear? I stopped. The words echoed again in my mind. I've been here for 7 years. She's not free, Roger continued. She's being held there. And Brad is the one keeping her. The rage shifted, focused. Brad had lied to me for 7 years. Identified a body that wasn't my daughter. Took my money. Let Gloria die. Kept Ivy from her mother. Brad had imprisoned my child. We need to go there now, I said, moving toward the door. Roger blocked me. Not yet. She's alive. She's being held prisoner. And if we rush in without knowing everything, we could make it worse, he said. We don't know who else is involved. We don't know what Brad has over her. We don't know how dangerous this is. I don't care, Stephen, Roger said, gripping my shoulders. Your daughter has survived 7 years in that warehouse. If we act recklessly, she could get hurt. The words stopped me cold. We need the full truth, Roger said. Then we get her out safely. How? We talk to her, he said. Away from Brad. The footage shows she leaves the warehouse briefly each afternoon. If she has a routine, we approach her then. And say what? We tell her you're here, Roger said quietly. That you know she's alive. That you want to help. I sank back into the chair, head in my hands. My daughter was alive, and for 7 years I had believed she was dead. I couldn't wait anymore. I had to see her. Roger had wanted to wait. Plan it out. Catch her when she came outside during the day, approach her somewhere safe. But how was I supposed to go home and sleep knowing my daughter? My daughter, who I'd mourned for 7 years, was alive. Locked in some warehouse while I sat in my empty house staring at fake ashes. I couldn't do it. So at 9 o'clock that night I got in my car. Didn't even tell Roger I was going. Just drove. He was already there when I pulled up. Standing by his car across from building 447, arms crossed, waiting. He'd known. Of course he'd known. Couldn't sleep either, I said. I figured you'd do something stupid. He wasn't smiling. If we're doing this, we do it my way. We go in, we stay calm, we listen. Got it? Yeah. I mean it, Stephen. No matter what she says. No matter how angry you get. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. The warehouse looked wrong at night. Like something out of a nightmare. One light in an upper window. Everything else dark. We crossed the street. The side door Brad always used. Roger tried the handle. Unlocked. He looked at me. Private investigation. Reasonable cause. Someone's in danger. I know. Just making sure we're clear. He pushed the door open. Inside was bigger than I expected. Colder. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones. High ceilings, shadows everywhere, shelves stacked with God knows what. But in the back corner, past all the industrial debris, someone had tried to make a home. A twin bed, blankets that had seen better days, a card table with a hot plate instant coffee plastic spoons, clothes on wire hangers strung between two posts, one folding chair, one battery lamp throwing weak yellow light across concrete floors, and photos, taped to the wall above the bed. Ivy, all of them. Every school picture I'd sent Brad over the years. Every birthday photo. That one from the park last summer where she'd lost her front tooth. They were here. On this wall, in this warehouse. He'd been showing them to Willa. She was sitting on the bed, staring at those photos like they were the only thing keeping her alive. When the door creaked, she looked up. 7 years. 7 years since I'd seen that face. She looked so different. Thinner. Way too thin. Hair darker, longer, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks. Maybe months. And something else. Something in the way she held herself. Like she was always ready to run. Dad. Just that one word. Barely a whisper. And I lost it. How could you? It came out louder than I meant. Harsher. She flinched back against the wall. How could you do this to us? I can explain. Explain. I took a step toward her. She pressed harder against the wall. Your mother died, Willa. Your mother. She died thinking you were gone. Dad, please. She cried every single day. Every single day for 6 months. Do you understand that 6 months of watching her waste away and I couldn't? My voice cracked. Says I couldn't help her because our daughter was dead. Except you weren't dead. You were here. You were here the whole time. The words were coming out wrong, too angry, too loud, but I couldn't stop them. Gloria died believing you burned to death in that car. She died of a broken heart. And you just let her. You let her die thinking, when I didn't want that. Willa was crying now. Full-on crying, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor. I never wanted any of this. Then why, I was almost shouting. Why did you do it? Why did you let us have a funeral for a stranger? Why did you let me pay Brad $280,000 to raise your daughter while you hid in a warehouse? She was sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. Just sitting there on the concrete floor, arms wrapped around her knees, shaking. Roger stepped between us. Physically stepped between us. Stephen, stop. She needs to explain, and she will. But you need to calm down. Calm down. My daughter's been lying to me for 7 years. Stephen. Roger's voice cut through everything. Look at her. I stopped. Looked. Really looked this time. She wasn't just thin. She was gaunt. Cheekbones too sharp. Wrists too small. Her clothes a faded t-shirt and jeans that didn't fit hung off her like she'd been wearing them for years. Her hair was dull, lifeless, and those scars on her arms. Small white lines. Some old, some newer. This wasn't someone who'd run away to start a new life in paradise. This was someone barely surviving. Willa, Roger said quietly. He crouched down, not getting too close. We're not here to hurt you. We're here because we want to help. Can you look at me? She raised her head, eyes red and swollen and terrified. We need to understand what happened. Roger continued. Can you tell us that? She looked at him, then at me, then at the photos of Ivy on the wall. If I tell you. Her voice was so small. If I tell you, you'll hate me. I don't hate you, I said, and weirdly I meant it. I was furious, devastated, confused as hell. But looking at her sitting there on that floor in that warehouse surrounded by photos of the daughter she'd never met, I couldn't hate her. I just need to know why. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve. It's not a simple story. We have time. Do you? She laughed, but it came out broken. Do you really want to hear this? Yes. She stared at the concrete floor for a long time. So long I thought she'd changed her mind. Then she spoke. Does Ivy know about me being alive? No, she thinks you're dead. Everyone does. Another sob. Quick, choked off. Maybe that's better. Willa, you don't understand, Dad. She looked up at me. Those eyes, Jesus, those eyes looked dead. You don't understand what I did, what I am. So help me understand. Silence. Just the sound of her breathing. Ragged. Uneven. Finally, 7 years ago, something happened. Something I can't take back. And the only way to survive was to disappear. To let everyone think I was dead. What happened? Roger asked. She closed her eyes. If I tell you, you have to promise me something. What? That you won't tell Ivy. Ever. She can't know about this. About me. About any of it. Willa, promise me. Her voice cracked. Please. She deserves better than me. I looked at Roger. He gave a small shake of his head. Don't promise that. Just tell us what happened, I said. She pulled her knees tighter to her chest. I need to start at the beginning, but when I'm done. She looked at me with those hollow, broken eyes. Now when I'm done, you'll understand why I can never leave here. Why I can never see Ivy. Why this is what I deserve. My throat felt tight. Willa, the truth came in pieces. But I was about to learn it was only part of the truth. Willa's voice shook as she began. It was 7 years ago. March. Natalie came over to my apartment. We lived about 20 minutes apart back then. She'd borrowed money from me. A lot of money. $5,000. She paused, looked at her hands. I needed it back. Brad and I were trying to buy a house, and I'd told Natalie that. Told her I needed the money by the end of the month. But she kept making excuses. Said she'd pay me back next week, next month, when her tax return came. It had been almost a year. Her voice got quieter. So that night I told her I needed it. Like really needed it. And she got defensive. Started saying I was being selfish, that I didn't understand how hard things were for her. What happened? Roger asked gently. Willa closed her eyes. We argued. It got loud. Brad wasn't home. He'd taken Ivy to his mom's for the weekend. It was just us. And Natalie, she said something about how I always thought I was better than her. Always had everything figured out. And she stopped, swallowed hard. When I told her she was irresponsible. That maybe if she stopped spending money on stupid things, she could pay me back. And she got in my face. Like really in my face, yelling. And I pushed her. The warehouse was completely silent. I just pushed her. Not hard. Just to get her away from me. But she stumbled backward and Willa's voice cracked. She hit the coffee table, the corner of it, right here. She touched the side of her head just above her temple. There was this sound, this awful sound, and she fell. Just collapsed. Tears were streaming down her face now. She was hurt, really hurt. There was so much. On the carpet, on the table, on my hands. And Natalie, she wasn't moving. She wasn't responding. I checked, but I couldn't feel anything. And I didn't know what to do. She was hyperventilating. Roger moved closer but didn't touch her. Breathe, Willa. Just breathe. She gulped air, nodded, kept going. I panicked. I called Brad. He came home right away. And when he walked in and saw Natalie on the floor, he just stared for a minute. Then he checked her, put his fingers on her neck. And he looked at me and said, "She's gone." My stomach turned. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't think. Brad kept saying we had to stay calm, had to figure this out. He said it was self-defense, that I'd just been protecting myself. But he said, she looked at me. He said even if it was an accident, even if it was self-defense, I'd probably still go to prison. That Natalie's family would push for charges, that I'd lose everything, lose you, lose Mom, lose Ivy. So he suggested faking your death, Roger said. Willa nodded. He said it was the only way. That if I disappeared, if everyone thought I was gone, no one would connect me to what happened with Natalie. He said he'd take care of everything, the situation, the evidence, all of it. I just had to trust him. And you did. What choice did I have? Her voice rose desperate. My best friend had I was responsible for what happened. I was terrified. And Brad was so calm, so sure. He said he knew someone who could help, someone who worked at the morgue. I felt sick. Gary. I don't know his name. Brad never told me. But yeah, someone at the morgue. Brad said he could help us with the situation. Someone who had passed without family. Someone no one would miss. She shuddered. It sounds so horrible saying it out loud. What happened to Natalie? Roger asked. Brad said he took care of everything, that no one would ever find out. He wouldn't tell me where. Said it was safer if I didn't know. Willa wrapped her arms around herself. And that same night he brought me here, to the warehouse, told me to stay put while he arranged everything. The accident, the funeral, all of it. The Route 9 accident, I said. Yeah. He staged it to look like I'd crashed. The car caught fire. Made sure what they found couldn't be identified. Then he came back here and told me it was done. Everyone thought I was gone. And now I had to stay hidden until it was safe. Safe from what? Roger asked. From the police. From Natalie's family. Willa's voice was hollow. Brad said they'd figure it out eventually. That someone would notice Natalie was missing. That they'd start asking questions. He said if I stayed hidden, if I just waited it out, eventually people would forget. Move on. For 7 years, she laughed bitterly. It was supposed to be temporary. A few months, maybe a year. But every time I asked when I could leave, Brad said it wasn't safe yet. That the police were still looking. That Natalie's family hired a private investigator. That people were asking questions about me. She looked at the photos of Ivy on the wall. He said it was better this way. That Ivy was safer not knowing me. That if I came back, if anyone found out what happened, Ivy would suffer for it. So I stayed. For her. To protect her. My chest felt tight. Willa, did you know I was sending Brad money? What money? True, $40,000 a year. For 7 years. To take care of Ivy. Her face went pale. I didn't know that. Brad never told me. He never mentioned it. No, he brought me food, supplies, sometimes clothes. He said he was taking care of Ivy, that she was fine. That was it. Roger and I exchanged a look. And Willa, Roger said carefully. When Natalie fell when you checked on her, are you absolutely certain she didn't make it? Willa stared at him. She was so hurt. She wasn't moving. But did you check thoroughly? Did Brad check? He put his fingers on her neck. He said she was gone. But you didn't see him do it. You were crying, panicking. You might not have seen exactly what he did. What are you saying? Roger leaned forward. I'm saying Brad told you Natalie didn't make it, but you never actually confirmed it yourself. You were in shock. You trusted him. Willa stopped. I saw her fall. I saw how badly she was hurt. Well, head injuries can look worse than they are, Roger said. Even minor ones can cause a lot of... He paused. A lot of visible damage. It doesn't necessarily mean the worst. No. Willa shook her head. No, she's gone. I'm responsible. That's why I'm here. Roger looked at me, then back at Willa. Willa, have you seen Natalie since that night? What number? Of course not. Have you seen anything that proves what Brad told you was true? Brad said a lot of things. Roger's voice was firm. But have you actually seen proof? Willa's face crumpled. Why are you asking me this? Roger pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen